Good morning. These are our opening words. The pale blue dot. This picture was taken by Voyager 1 on February 14th, 1990, when the probe was 3.7 billion miles from Earth. Carl Sagan, who requested the picture, wrote these words. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human that whoever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every quote-unquote superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam.
Good morning. Welcome to the digital space of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Lubbock. We are a religious community of free minds, and all are welcome to join us. All are welcome. All the colors of the rainbow are welcome. Whatever definitions you have given yourself and whatever designations you have been given by others, you are welcome. Central to our identity as Unitarian Universalists is the concept of the free pulpit and the free pew. The free pulpit means our speaker can speak the truth as she or he sees it. The free pew means that we as members are not required to agree with everything we hear. Unitarian Universalism draws from many sources and many faiths. Our services are varied and diverse, as is our lay-led community. I hope that some elements of the service comfort you and that you will be open to new experiences. If an element of the service does not appeal to you, rejoice that somebody else might be touched by it. I am Gail Madison, and I am your service leader today. Please take a moment to think about the people you love. Now reach out today. Call, text, email, video chat with someone for your mental health and theirs. Each week, we light a flame in our chalice as a symbol of our history and to celebrate our freedom of religious expression. Asher Sellers will light the chalice for us today. Our chalice lighting words are like the first hint of green by Jennifer McLaughlin. As the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as that bud slowly opens with each new day to form a yellow daffodil, let us be like that first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays, and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. We light this chalice to bring a glimmer of that warmth into our space. Since the times are strange, and I know we all have joys and many concerns, Asher will now place a stone for me and for all of you at home in our community candle. And he will place a second stone for everything that is going on in the world as a whole. Thank you, Asher. The church continues to function. Most of the staff continues to work. So please, if you can, mail in your pledges or other contributions to the church office, or set them aside until we are back together again. Now we're going to read our children's story right now. And it's about trees, because one of the things we're celebrating today is Arbor Day. The book, We Planted a Tree, by Diane Muldrow. We planted a tree. We planted a tree and it grew up. We planted a tree and it grew up. Well, it reached for the sky and the sun. The sunshine went into the leaves and brought food to the tree, and the tree grew up. Fat little buds appeared on the branches. The sunshine went into the buds, and soon they burst open. Everywhere it was pink, and we were dizzy with springtime. The sun kept shining. The pink blossoms dropped off, but soon there were green leaves, green, shiny leaves, which had food inside for the tree. Green, shiny leaves, which cooled us, which kept the earth cool. We planted a tree, and it grew up and gave us a shady place. The tree's leaves helped clean the air, and we breathed better. The tree fed us apples and oranges and lemons. And sap for our syrup. We planted a tree and it grew up. The tree kept the soil from blowing away. Now rainwater could stay in the earth. The soil became healthier because the tree was there. So we planted butternut squash and beans, corn and onions and cabbage in the healthy soil, the rich, dark dirt. We could grow our own food, and we ate better. We planted a tree, and it grew up, and it dropped acorns that fed the squirrels in winter, and birds came, and other animals came too, to live with the tree. We planted a tree, and that one tree made the world better. We planted a tree, and that one tree helped heal the earth. We planted a tree, and it grew up. And so did we. It's a beautiful story for us to remember. Once upon a time, the youth, Kristin and I, were planning this service in what was a totally different world, like maybe last January. Part of what we had planned was to thank Mother Earth for Earth Day and to celebrate trees for Arbor Day. This past Wednesday, the 22nd, was the 50th Earth Day celebration. Yesterday, for some people, it was Friday was Arbor Day. So, in our original thought, we were going to create a large representation of the Earth out of cardboard titled, "Thank You, Mother Earth." We would then have each of you write out what you want to thank Mother Earth for on a colorful circle, which we would then place on our Earth. Well, plans changed, so we have a world map. I have this world map because one of the things I do is donate money to Doctors Without Borders. If you want a world map, donate money to them. But what we have is Thank You, Mother Earth, and our whole, except for the north and south polar regions, our whole Earth. On my card, I wrote, "Thank you, Mother Earth, for the Lubbock skies. We're about 88.3% sky, according to Molly Ivins. That's just about right." And I agree with her. Harv, who loves the sky and does photography of the sky, wrote cirrus clouds. Kristin asked 6-year-old Conan what he liked about the earth and what he wanted to say to thank Mother Earth, and his comment was beautiful. Now, our son Harvey, by the way, wrote thank you for the Rocky Mountains because that's one of his favorite places on the earth. Now, Arbor Day, as I mentioned, is normally the last Friday of April. In Texas, we like to celebrate Arbor Day in the first Friday of November because that's a better time for planting trees here. But what we had done is we had started creating our cardboard tree. And we added the leaves. And what we want people to do here is to tell us the location of their favorite tree or trees. For instance, on mine, I wrote in Bellevue, Nebraska, the grove that was between the St. Columban's Mission and McLaughlin Circle where I grew up, because there was a wonderful tree there that we could climb up and jump out of at will. Harv wrote about trees in Central California because, again, he loves to photograph those. Our son wrote Lake Crescent trees on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. Someone else wrote the trees in my grandma's yard. But that was the plan. These are not going to leave the church. We have lots of our circles that we're going to have out and available for you when we can come back together, because we want all of us to be able to celebrate trees and to celebrate Mother Earth. I also want to mention the Arbor Day Foundation. And the reason is because I grew up in Bellevue, Nebraska. You go south of Bellevue, across the Platte River, and you're going to end up in Nebraska City, which is where someone named J. Sterling Morton, you might have heard of Morton Salt, lived. And in 1872, he proposed a tree planting holiday, Arbor Day. He proposed that to a meeting of the Nebraska State Board of Agriculture, and the date was set for the very first Arbor Day, April 10th, 1872. Since that day, well, on that day itself, it was estimated that more than 1 million trees were planted throughout the state. And one of the things that's interesting about the state of Nebraska, yes, there is a national forest in the state of Nebraska, but every tree in that forest was planted by people. In the years that followed, other states passed legislation to observe Arbor Day, and the tradition began in schools nationwide. Today, Arbor Day is celebrated in all 50 states and more than 40 countries around the globe. According to J. Sterling Morton, Arbor Day is not like other holidays. Each of those reposes upon the past. Arbor Day proposes for the future. Someday, we're not sure when, some form of normalcy will return. And when it does, like I said, our tree and our earth will be waiting for you, and we will be waiting for you. Right now, let's listen to a message from Kristin.
Hi guys, welcome to my video. Like and subscribe and hit that, oh wait, I'm sorry, it's a different video. Hello everyone, on this Blur's Day, April 2020, this is actually the first time that I have left my house since March 17th, and all my days are blurred together. What about you? I wanted to start with two notable events in history that have happened today. On this day in 1954, Jonas Salk began field trials of the polio vaccine, leading to the verification that the vaccine is safe and making it a standard part of childhood immunizations in America. Hopefully, soon enough, we will have another vaccination to add to that list. Another event that happened on this day was in 1986, and that was the nuclear reactor number 4 meltdown in Chernobyl, which is still causing problems today. But nuclear power is a great topic. It's not nearly as cut and dried as you would think. And alas, that is a topic for another time. But it is a great segue into Earth Day. Wednesday, the 22nd of this last week, was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. There were celebrations planned the world over for this momentous occasion. But it seems like this world of ours just loves to surprise us in the, well, most interesting ways. That's life, I suppose. But the show must go on, and here we are. After World War II, the consumption of leaded fuels became the backbone of American life. From our large, inefficient cars to our industrial factories, the smell of pollution in the air was dismissed as the smell of prosperity and considered the cost of improvement. Companies had no motivation to change because the public was largely unaware of how damaging pollution was, and there was no governing body to regulate the output of noxious gases in our atmosphere. That is until 1962, when a book called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson was published. Silent Spring represented a watershed moment, selling more than 500,000 copies in 24 countries. The book raised public awareness and concern for living organisms, the environment, and how pollution affected public health. People began to take notice that large cities across the world were being covered with thick, hazy layers of smog, and clouds were dumping toxic acid rains across the lands. But it wasn't until 1969 that the environmental movement began to gather momentum. In January of that year, over 80,000 barrels of crude oil were dumped into the Santa Barbara Channel off of the coast of California, with devastating consequences. This spurred Governor Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin into action. Inspired by the anti-war movement, Senator Nelson teamed up with Pete McCloskey, a Republican congressman who appreciated conservation, and Dennis Hayes, a young activist, and started a college teach-in campaign. Basically, large, more loosely constructed seminars on college campuses. They chose April 22nd, a weekday falling between spring break and final exams, to maximize the greatest student participation. Soon enough, just like with the anti-war movement, their efforts broadened to the education of all Americans, and soon it included a worldwide range of organizations, faith groups, and others. They changed the name to Earth Day, which immediately sparked national media attention and caught on across the country. Earth Day inspired 20 million Americans at the time, 10% of the total population of the U.S., to take to the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate against the impacts of 150 years of industrial development, which had left a growing legacy of serious human health impacts. The thousands of colleges and universities organized protests against the deterioration of the environment. They were massive coast-to-coast rallies in cities, towns, and communities. Groups that had been fighting individually against oil spills, polluting factories and power plants, raw sewage, toxic dumps, pesticides, freeways, the loss of wilderness, and the extinction of wildlife united on Earth Day around these shared and common values. Earth Day in 1970 united people of various backgrounds and religions. Republicans, Democrats, rich, poor, urban dwellers, farmers, business and labor leaders. By the end of the 1970s, the first Earth Day led to the creation of the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of other first of their kind environmental laws, including the National Environmental Education Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Air Act. 2 years later, Congress passed the Clean Water Act, and a year after that, in 1973, Congress passed the Endangered Species Act, as well as the Federal Insecticide and Fungicide and Rodenticide Act soon after that. These laws have protected millions of men, women, and children from diseases and death, and have protected hundreds of species from extinction. Today, Earth Day is widely recognized as the largest secular holiday in the world, marked by more than 1 billion people every year as a day of action to change human behavior and create global, national, and local policy changes. Over the decades, the Earth Day Network has brought hundreds of millions of people into the environmental movement, creating opportunities for civic engagement and volunteerism in 193 countries. Earth Day engages more than 1 billion people every year and has become one of the most important paths to a larger environmental discussion around the world. This greater focus on the environment and steps we need to take to slow further damage and help prevent further harm has led to some great successes. The hole in the ozone layer, a true environmental disaster, has rapidly been healing due to the ban on various chemicals in response to public outcry in the 1990s. Thanks in large part to the efforts of the people in China and India, the world is now the greenest it has been in 20 years. The International Renewable Energy Agency reports that 1/3 of the world's energy is now coming from renewable sources. Peru has pledged to end palm oil-driven deforestation by 2021. Biodegradable plastics is being developed and tested around the world. None of these victories would have come about had it not been for the voice of the people demanding change from governments and businesses around the world, and without the efforts of Senator Nelson and the others around him leading to a unified Earth Day, it's hard to say if this powerful voice would exist. Let's take a moment to address the elephant in the room, the coronavirus. The effects of this disease cannot be overstated, both on a personal level and on a societal level. Let me be clear up front. I do not wish to diminish the suffering of COVID-19 has had on anyone, either due to illness or death, loss of income, mental anguish in this climate of uncertainty, or the pain that millions of people will feel on the road to personal and national economic recovery. That being said, there's a little bit of a silver lining with this pandemic on an environmental level. I want to take a look at this silver lining today. We've seen all the stories about animals reclaiming the land to a degree, coming out of the woodlands they've been relegated to and walking the streets that we've declared as being ours for decades. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Global emissions of harmful gases such as carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide have seen large reductions in the last few months, mainly due to large-scale halting of flights, driving, and industry. In New York City, for example, CO2 levels are down 5 to 10%, and carbon monoxide levels from traffic are down as low as 50%. Experts say that there will be a drop of 1/3% in global emissions, which is a much bigger deal than you would think with a number that seemingly small. If we were to couple that with a larger commitment to developing clean energy during this time, we wouldn't see a large bounce back of emissions and emission levels from fossil fuel usage as the pandemic passes. A lot of this cutting down on travel does result from people, unfortunately, losing their jobs. But many employers are finding ways for employees to work remotely, which we've been told for decades wasn't possible in most situations. Environmental experts have been begging for this kind of change for years, only to be told that it was impossible, too expensive, wouldn't work well with their business, etc. Now that they have been forced to adapt, many are finding it's a lot more feasible than they had thought it would be when they first dismissed it. Asking businesses to change the way that they operate can be a lot like asking the sun to stop rising. And sometimes an event completely out of everyone's control is the only thing that can force that change. And many businesses are finding that changes are easier to implement, and they are finding themselves more flexible than they had originally thought. Now that the curtain has been pulled back on a lot of "it can't be done" rhetoric, we can more confidently demand a change of this type. Along with this, many people are going to the store once, maybe twice a week, and are cooking at home at much higher levels than many of them probably ever have. This reduction in store trips is causing people to be more careful and more judicious with the supplies they have on hand, and neither money nor food availability is a given at this point in time for most people. We are also getting a lot more really great cooks out of this. Maybe a glimmer of hope at the end of the outbreak isn't just a better safety net for the most vulnerable among us, but a realistic, achievable, solid plan for attacking climate change. Researchers have the ability to study environmental and emissions data in a way that they haven't since, to a degree, the financial crash of 2008 and 2009. What a shame that the only way that we can be nice to the planet on a large global scale is when our economies crash. With coal, natural gas, and fossil fuel in a bit of a compromised state, this may be the time for green energy to force its way into the conversation and secure itself as a primary source of energy for us to return to at the end of the pandemic. We don't have to mine the sun. We don't have to pollute nearby water sources to try to get wind from underground. We don't have to throw harmful emissions into the air when we use steam and hydrogen fuel cells to power electric grids and vehicles. Once again, though, we can't entrust the government and companies to change on their own. And this wouldn't be a youth service or a Kristin service, for that fact, without a call to action. We have to speak up, we have to speak out, and we have to speak loudly about what we want in our world to look like at the end of this tunnel. Do we want to pick up exactly where we left off and be satisfied with the status quo? Or do we want to at least to try to aim for something different, something better, not just for us, but for all future generations to come? Because the next pandemic may be one of our own creation, created by carelessness and fueled by greed. And all the social distancing in the world may not be enough to stop it, especially as lawmakers prioritize the economy above all else and the environmental concerns quickly fall onto the back burner. We saw after the 2008-2009 crash that levels shot up by 5% as stimulus money boosted the usage of fossil fuels. Without us, the people, the true might of this world, standing up against such an outcome, this could be just as bad, if not worse. Now that we're done with the scary stuff, Gail is going to finish it up.
There are challenges ahead. But I do want to bring forth a positive that happened this past week. The Clean Air Act, which had been under threat and had been the topic in our Supreme Court, got a boost this week when by a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court said that the EPA cannot narrow the definition of what waters need to be protected. 6-3. We know the four who voted, and we knew were going to vote to protect the EPA. But in addition, John Roberts, the Chief Justice, voted to protect the EPA, and so did Brett Kavanaugh. So we ended up with a 6-3 decision upholding the Clean Water Act. That's a big deal, and that's a good thing. Now, last week in the Avalanche Journal, there was an article on the opinion page that was written by two people. A woman named Spelling, who, if you recall, she was George W. Bush's Secretary of Education. She also right now is the president and CEO of an organization called Texas 2036, the point at which Texas will be 200 years old. The article is also by a man named Nielsen Gammon, who is a Regents professor at A&M and was named the state climatologist by George W. Bush in the year 2000. Here's what they have to say. The headline, Data. Texas weather is changing and Texans should prepare. Data makes hard conversations easier, and few conversations have been as difficult as the ones around climate. It was important to us as respectively Texas state climatologist and the CEO of a nonprofit organization focused on Texas' future to bring a new lens to this issue. We wanted a data-driven look to get insight into the future of Texas and its weather. The data show that Texas climate has been changing. That's the conclusion of a scientific report by Texas A&M University researchers, funded in part by Texas 2036, that observed and analyzed historical, meteorological, and climate data for Texas. If, as expected, current trends continue, our changing climate will pose more challenges to Texans living here in 2036, the year Texas turns 200, than today in several ways. The number of 100-degree days will double over the next couple of decades. The expected average temperature in 2036 will be about 3 degrees warmer than the average over the last half of the last century. By 2036, extreme rainfall is expected to be 30 to 50% more frequent than the 1950 to 1999 average, causing more flooding, especially in Houston and other cities where impervious surfaces increase rainwater runoff intensity. Higher temperatures and increased rainfall variability will cause more intense droughts. For some parts of the Texas coast, the storm surge risk may double by 2050 due to sea level rise and more intense hurricanes. This data, which is consistent with data produced by climate prediction models widely used by scientists, shows that as Texas prepares to add 10 million more people by 2036 and build an economy with 7 to 8 million more jobs, Texas policymakers and business leaders need to prepare for a future that looks different from the past. Big cities like Houston need to prepare for more frequent episodes of extreme rainfall and flooding, as the city is doing through its recently released Resilient Houston plan. At the same time, rural communities in West Texas should plan for more intense droughts. Our growing state needs to leverage this data and our innovation, talent, and leadership to strategically plan for what a changing climate will mean for our water supply, infrastructure, and economy. Given the long-term horizon of 2036, our strong economy can help position us for the future as we rethink everything from growing crops to creating resilient infrastructure to preempting new government budget problems. At the same time, we can harness the state's vast leadership and expertise to slow or even reverse these trends. Yes, Texas leads the nation in carbon emissions, largely because we have played such a vital role in supplying energy to the nation and the world. But we are also the world's epicenter of energy innovation. In recent years, Texas has experienced the worst one-year drought on record, its wettest year, its costliest hurricane, and its highest storm rainfall total. To extend its prosperity into future generations, Texas has both the responsibility to prepare for extreme weather and the opportunity to lead on innovations that the world needs to address coming climate challenges. The data are in. Our growing population and thriving economy will face more extreme weather by our state's bicentennial. So the question is, what are we planning to do about it? And remember, that was in the Avalanche Journal, the conservative Avalanche Journal. So, we've talked about Earth Day. We've talked about the history of Earth Day. We have talked about trees and how we love trees. We've talked about how citizen action can cause government bodies to change. So, let's look at our closing words. Cooperation for human creativity. And during the time I'm reading this, Asher will be extinguishing our flames. Love our earth. Take action to consume less, use less energy, respect water, and be cooperative, collaborative, and create community. Like the moss and the mushrooms, our children's lives depend on us. And to bring in some wisdom from Native Americans, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So we have extinguished this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace.